granted the European perspective. And the EU is deepening the relationship with all other partners of the Eastern Partnership, Armenia and Azerbaijan. The EU is transforming itself in the field of energy. It's looking for diversification, for strengthening of the partnership with countries which are reliable suppliers, like Azerbaijan, and it's also stepping up the transformation of the energy sector. So the panel will focus on all these issues. It will also focus on the big issues like digital transformation, which is offering to the countries of the Eastern Partnership, again, plenty of opportunities, but also smart agriculture, food safety, and so many others. For all these topics, we have here a brilliant panel. Really, people who are representing the countries, the greatest experts from the Eastern Partnership, also the brilliant colleagues from the European Commission and from the international financial institutions. So we will have here, and I will go one by one and introduce first the Eastern Partnership countries in alphabetical order. We have here Mane Adamyan from the government of Republic of Armenia, who is the advisor to Deputy Prime Minister of Armenia. Welcome. I'd like to introduce Elnur Aliyev, who is the first Deputy Minister at the Ministry of Economy of the Republic of Azerbaijan. Welcome, Elnur. Then we have here Gennady Averladze, who is the Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development of Georgia. We have here Sergiu Gerțiu, Minister of Agriculture and Food Industry of the Republic of Moldova, who is the State Secretary. Welcome. Then we have online, or maybe not quite now, but Taras Kachka, who is Deputy Minister of Ukrainian Ministry of Economy, is supposed to be there. Will be there, is there. Oh, great. He was just able to make it from the shelter, anti-bombing shelter on the screen. Taras, welcome. We are so pleased to have you here. And then we have here from the European Commission, Lawrence Meredith. Lawrence, welcome here. And his colleague also, Lawrence is from the DG NEAR, Director for the Neighborhood and East. We have also his colleague from the European Commission, Head of Unit E1, Europe and Eastern Neighborhood, Ignacio Iruarizaga Diaz. Ignacio, welcome. From the international institutions, we have Susan Goranson, who is from European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, Director, Infrastructure Europe, Sustainable Infrastructure Group. Welcome, Susan. And Lionel Rapai, last but not least, the European Investment Bank. Lionel is Director for Neighboring Countries. So this is a really very powerful panel, and I'm so pleased that we can focus in that composition on the future of the Eastern Partnership and on the business opportunities and the economic cooperation. But first of all, I would start the debate with Taras Kachka, because for Ukraine, what will happen in the long run, it's important. But even more important and pressing is what's happening maybe next week or next month, what's happening during the winter, what's happening with the critical infrastructure, because Ukraine is under this brutal and cruel bombing. So winterization and the reconstruction of critical infrastructure, I suppose these will be the main messages of Taras Kachka. Taras, I would like to turn to you with the first question and ask you if you can elaborate a little bit what the European Union can do for Ukraine right now, what is in the short term, the need, and where you would see the business and economic opportunities in the medium and longer term with the reconstruction, which is so much discussed in the European quarters. So you have the floor.
Thank you, and my apologies that I'm like in different scale in comparison with you. So it's usually a trick with being online that a person is rather times bigger or smaller than the persons that are actually participating in discussions. Today we have and even currently we have alert, and we have attack of drones to a lot of Ukrainian regions in Ternopil, in Vinnytsia and Khmelnytsk region, and this morning to Kiev as well. And what we see for last week, so starting from last Monday, and it was every day, shellings of Ukrainian energy infrastructure, electricity energy infrastructure. Russia do it deliberately, quite, let's say, organized with a massive attacks of drones. Only today, this morning, they sent 43 drones against Ukraine. And this is a really a challenge for Ukrainian economy, because all our economy depends on electricity. And I admire Ukrainian electricity grid operator Ukrenergo that manages to maintain normal supply of electricity, and Ukrenergo by itself is a good example how European integration helps us to be resilient, because our electricity grid operator managed to integrate into EU electricity grid at the beginning of this war. So I think that the first day of Russian attack was the first day of autonomous work of Ukrenergo, and then in March we integrated, and now even so that in summer we started to export electricity to the EU. Now this option is undermined by Russia. So this is as well attack on EU consumers as well. So because we able to supply electricity to the EU. So the same problem Russia creates regionally for all participants of Eastern Partnership policy and the EU. So in Black Sea, I think that my colleague Gennady Arveladze knows quite well that before war we have quite stable and predictable trade routes from Odessa to Poti, and helping us to trade between us and in the region as well. So now this trade route is blocked by Russia, and generally export from Ukraine is blocked. So, but at the same time, we see that despite all these developments, we continue our integration with our friends, so like with Georgia and Moldova. So we have common rules of origin, and we detached from post-Soviet trade rules from trade agreements that involves Russia. So we now work on our bilateral agreements using pan-Euro-Mediterranean rules of origin, so we integrate our markets with the EU. As well, recently we signed rules of origin in Guam, helping us to start the free trade agreement between Georgia, Ukraine, Ázerbájdžánem and Moldova. So we also creating our own autonomous trade universe, which is not depends on Russia. So generally, we see that in long term, so within Eastern Partnership, all the initiatives that were declared more than 10 years ago about possibilities to integrate trade between the states of Eastern Partnership on the principles of EU rules, now fruiting into less dependent, more integrated, and more, let's say, globally more integrated economies and trade in Ukraine and other members of Eastern Partnership. So it helps us to be more resilient, and it is also works like a good foundation for first of all early recovery, so that is needed for living through winter. So I think that all the integrational projects that were implemented in energy help Ukraine and Moldova, for example, to be more prepared for winter, and we can not only request support from the European Union, but also receive this kind of support because our grids are integrated. So we have more understanding between companies, more commercial ties. So that's why I think that we are not so afraid of this severe winter that definitely will be severe and difficult because we already see how we can mutually support each other. So that's why I think that in these forthcoming months, there will be a lot of talks, a lot of common projects on maintaining the operation of all grids, so that electricity and gas and heating grids. So I think that this support or this short-term support from EU institutions will be needed, definitely. But I am glad that due to the previous integrational projects, this support will not be something ad hoc, but rather continuation of long-term integrational projects. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Indeed, the framework of the EU integration will provide quite a robust base for the future relationship between the European Union and Ukraine. Also, the same goes with Moldova and hopefully for Georgia. I would go with my second question now to Lawrence Meredith, because it would be good to get a bigger frame of where we are with the Eastern Partnership. What is the future for the Eastern Partnership? Now, it would be interested also in the economic term and the businesses and investment. What kind of areas we are right now focusing on, and what are the prospective future new areas which might be generated also by the situation we are right now in. Lawrence, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister, and it's a pleasure to be here in Prague today, as I said this morning. And it's a very pertinent question, and I think, you know, I'm impressed to see how many people have been mobilized both in person and online for this first Eastern Partnership Business Forum to take place in a physical format for a long time. And I think it shows that despite all the challenges, and I must repeat, especially with Taras Online, that how the whole of the European Union stands with Ukraine, and especially amid all this dreadful drone bombs. And I think it shows how important it is that we come together with our Eastern partner friends, also to show that we are united. And I'd like to, if I can say that, in opening up this panel, I'd like to look at it from three main angles, in fact. Firstly, starting with the subject of the day and the economy and trade and investment links. I think it's so important that we make every step possible to boost the trade and investment opportunities across the Eastern Partnership region and in connection with the European Union. And that in many ways is why we're all here, in fact. And I'd like to give you a couple of examples, and you've heard from some of these already today, of projects that we think are particularly powerful. You've already seen the big results of the EU for business, and nearly 80,000 SMEs only last year. You heard the Commissioner set our ambitious objective of working with over 500,000 SMEs over the coming 5 years. So I think with SMEs as the lifeblood of the economy, both in the Eastern Partnership and the European Union, our objective is clear, and it's so important that we're here with our friends from the international financial institutions and also member state agencies, because it's very much a Team Europe approach. But I'd also say, and it's great that we've got Ignacio with us, because trade is so key, and despite all the challenges, trade with the Eastern partners has gone up over 70% over the last 5 years, which is a really powerful signal that despite all the difficulties, there is an increased desire to trade between the Eastern Partnership and the European Union. And I think we have our EU for Trade help desk, which I think is a really useful tool that is able to answer a lot of the practical questions and overcome some of the challenges for regular exporters and importers, and I think this is an important issue because we're very much committed to streamlining these processes, making it easy access for companies that maybe are more used to working on the domestic markets, and to help them deal with all that's involved, whether it's the standards and certification aspects, whether it's the administration of getting the permits necessary. So I think this EU for Trade help desk is a really powerful example of what we're doing together. The second point, and it very much came up from my Ukrainian colleagues' presentation, we're facing doubtless a very challenging winter with rising energy prices, and I think diversifying our connectivity links is particularly important. And maybe let me start with energy. I mean, first we were hit by the COVID pandemic, now by Russia's illegal, unprovoked and unjustified invasion of Ukraine, which is having severe consequences primarily for Ukraine, but also for the whole region and for the European Union in terms of escalating energy prices that we're all having to deal with. But I think it shows all the more importance that we need to attach to diversifying those energy routes. And the European Union has been very active with Eastern partners in looking at new opportunities to do that. And also, I mean, the very simple point, and I know the Eastern partner countries well, energy efficiency, we have to step up our game on energy efficiency and reduce on the demand side, but also we have to look at new angles on the supply side, whether it's increasing renewables, and there's such high potential across the region for increases in solar, in wind, in hydro, and other renewable sources, hydrogen looking to the future as well. And I mentioned this morning that the Commissioner's vision in our economic and investment plan is very much for strengthening Black Sea connectivity. Of course, the Black Sea, it's a challenge right now, but looking longer term, we see at least 3 different ways across the Black Sea, and the European Union really wants to help with all 3, which is an electricity cable under the water would be one of the most ambitious submarine electricity projects of all time, but also a fiber optic cable under the sea, and the ferry connections potentially between Constanza, for example, and one of the Georgian ports. I'm sure Gennady will talk about that. So, I mean, strengthening and diversifying connectivity, energy, transport, the trans-European networks, but also the digital connections. And here, working on the next steps towards roaming is something that Eastern Partnership citizens are passionate about, and where we saw the benefits already inside the European Union. So let's go the extra mile and help our Eastern Partner friends on the roaming agreement longer term. And I think also you can see that it's about tech is so important going forward. Without this, we wouldn't have our connection with our Ukrainian friend today, and with all the colleagues online. But digital transport corridors are very much about the future. And that brings me to my third and final point, and I'm sorry if I'm a little bit long, but it was a big question. And that's, I think, strengthening resilience through building our common values and linking it with the digital, and something that I know that our Czech friends are particularly strong on, it's cybersecurity. It's great that we're moving into a more digital world, but we're embracing huge risks that many of us, and I speak for myself, far from understand. So we need to work with our partners who are more expert, and I know from my contacts informally throughout the event that there are some such people in the audience today, so I look forward to learning from you. But I think, strengthening resilience, and as this awful war is showing, we need to have more imagination, more technological capacity, and simply more savvy to adapt to the modern realities of hybrid warfare. And that means, but also in investing, because trade and investment is also about predictability and reliability, and that means having strong traditions of rule of law, strong public administration reform, and that, I think, and I know that the Czech minister, Minister Skela, spoke very eloquently about the Czech Republic's own 14-year journey to join the European Union, and how important having those strong values were at the heart of that project. And I think that is something that really brings the Eastern Partnership together. So I'm very much convinced that we have new challenges, but we also have new opportunities, and I'm definitely sure that we're stronger together. Back to you, Jaroslav. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorenz. That was an excellent frame, big picture for the business relationship and economic ties with the Eastern Partnership. Now, I would stay in the European Commission, and then on your right-hand side, Ignacio, you are from the DG Trade, so would be good now to go in a more concrete business of, let's say, trade agenda. Of course, Lorenz named a couple of sectors which are so important, keywords like connectivity, digital transformation, and cybersecurity as well, but also others. We do have DCFTAs with 3 countries. We do have CEPA with Armenia. We are on the final line of negotiation on the agreement with Azerbaijan. So plenty of opportunities here. And I'd like to hear from you where the new opportunities lie. Of course, we saw that with Ukraine there are no tariffs and no quotas, so basically this is more easy access to the internal market. The similar way towards Moldova, but all this framework is also addressing the possible closer ties with other countries. So what's your point of view, where the prospects are, and just come with this closer detailed look. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaroslav, and good morning, good afternoon to all of you, and good afternoon to Taras as well from Ukraine. I think we have a framework which is very deep, as you described, Jaroslav, in your introduction. I mean, we have the DCFTAs, we have the agreement with Armenia, we're trying to have an agreement with Azerbaijan, non-preferential, but yet an important agreement for us. And that web of agreements and the elements that Taras has been mentioning, for instance, he referred to the fact that we are using the Pan-Euromed Convention of Rules of Origin in our bilateral agreements, and that creates a wave, a sort of grid of agreements that allow for, and this is very technical, accumulation of origin among us, and that forces trade among ourselves. And that fostering of trade is contributing to our resilience. When we look at data today, we are the biggest, the first trading partner for out of the countries here present. We are collectively, the Eastern Partnership represents our 11th trading partner, taken together right after India. So it's a very important relationship has developed thanks to a framework that we have. But that is not the end of the road. I think we think that if we want to continue fostering trade among us for our economic growth, but also for building our resilience, as Taras was saying, we can continue advancing. We have engineered some short-term measures to address the situation created by the Russian aggression on Ukraine. We have had, we have free trade, no quotas, no tariffs for trading goods with Ukraine to complement the DCFTA. We have also granted autonomous trade measures to Moldova. We have, we are working hard and continue trying to develop the so-called solidarity lanes to facilitate exports from Ukraine to the Union, but also to the rest of the world. That is very important, not only for our respective economies, but for the world economy and for developing economies in particular. We have also, in an unprecedented short term, agreed with Moldova and Ukraine on the road transport agreements that should be, again, facilitating the getting products out of Moldova and Ukraine. But again, that is short term, and we think it's not the end of the road. I mean, and beyond the possible accession, we think that the DCFTAs in particular offer a lot of potential. We can do a lot from the DCFTAs as they are today. We have the possibility to get close to or de facto internal market in some aspects. If you think of Product certification, the DCFTAs contemplate the possibility of having mutual recognition agreements with 3 DCFTA countries that would allow them to certify products for export to the Union from these countries and against their own legislation, once the legislation is aligned and the basic infrastructure is agreed. And we are doing quite a lot of progress, I think, in particular with our Ukrainian friends in that regard. It also foresees elements of facilitation in customs work with the possibility of having mutual recognition agreements on so-called authorized economic operators, and we are working hard on this, where Moldova is the front runner in this exercise, with an agreement entering into force hopefully on the 1st of November. There is also potential to continue enhancing or sort of integrating our public procurement markets, which are, as we know, a very important part of our economic activity and a very important part of our trade. And the agreements foresee on stages that the respective public procurement markets can be integrated following progress in the harmonization of the legislative frameworks. With Georgia, we have already achieved that, as Gennady is working closely with Gennady and his team. And now we have granted each other, access to our markets at the central level of government. There is a lot of potential also in the area of sanitary and phytosanitary rules that oftentimes are difficult to attain, and that in a sense it makes difficult to export some, in particular, foodstuffs of animal origin, and the DCFTA contains provisions to that effect as well. We have potential on services. In the case of Ukraine, the DCFTA contains already the possibility to foresees the possibility of integrating Ukraine in the internal market for important services sectors, for telecommunications, for financial services, for international maritime transport, and for postal and courier services. We are working with Ukraine on, beyond the general process that Lawrence mentioned on roaming in the Eastern Partnership. We are also discussing with Ukraine what can be done in terms of roaming bilaterally, and possibly integrating for that element Ukraine also in the internal markets. So a very large, significant potential of things that are embedded into the DCFTA, and that we think that are getting additional impetus due to the situation today, and where we are working very close with our friends to make it happen. And we think that if we make it happen, we will continue, contributing to make those their economies, but also our economy, less dependent from Russia in this particular case, and hopefully more integrated and overall resilient. Thanks. More happy to take questions later.
Thank you, Ignacio, with that concrete contribution about the opportunities. Let's now turn back to the partners, and of course it will be interesting to hear about your priorities, your particular sectors where you believe there is a special emphasis of your government you would like to develop. Imagine that there are some companies here who are trying to look for opportunities, and you can make a sort of publicity window for your strategies of your governments. Of course, you can take the advantage of having here the people from the European Commission. So what the European Union, what the European Commission can do to strengthen that cooperation. Mane, I will start with you. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, it's an absolute pleasure to be here today. I think it is also very symbolic that we're having this first meeting after the EU published its joint communication on the cooperation with the Eastern partners post-2020 here in Prague. Because this document reiterated the EU's commitment to the Eastern Partnership, and this message has been very important to us in Armenia, in terms of thinking of this format as something that is about shared values, about promoting democratic institutions in our countries, which is also very critical for economic cooperation. We in Armenia, after the EU published its economic and investment plan, started working very closely with our partners at the EU. And we prepared a package of proposals and presented it to our colleagues, where we tried to actually identify more specifically what kind of projects we can implement together. We know that this document beautifully put together the joint perspective for the Eastern Partnership in terms of how we see the cooperation in terms of the economic cooperation and also in terms of good governance, democracy, rule of law, like shared values. So various pillars in terms of economic cooperation and political cooperation were included. And there were also country-specific flagship initiatives that we jointly designed and put in this package with our colleagues. And for us, there were 5 main areas, and we later on also proposed extra sectors to look at. And those are support to the SMEs. I think currently, as we're facing so many challenges, we couldn't talk enough about this one, and I assume that it is basically included in the packages of most of the countries. This is very critical both in terms of increasing access to finance for SMEs, but also boosting the strategic areas of the economy. And we're very closely working with EBRD and EIB colleagues on these ones. We're trying to build upon those projects which have been successfully implemented in Armenia already by our colleagues and in partnership with us, but also to think of new financial tools, to think of how we can suggest the SMEs more innovative, more accessible financial tools, and I think there is space for work in this sense. And then we have the second flagship initiative, that is connectivity, increased connectivity, and here we're talking about specifically north-south corridor, road corridor, and we're currently looking at the southern part of this corridor, which we believe will be of regional importance. We're sure that when this project is fully implemented, and we have already started its implementation, some part of it is already there. We do think that when it is ready, it will support the region to get integrated into the larger transportation networks in the region, including the TEN-T TEN-T network of the European Union. So this is the second flagship initiative. Then we have the third one, that is on digitization and innovation. Again, I think currently we keep talking about this, and it is critical both in terms of boosting the economy, but also digitization of public services, creates more transparent environment, better accountability, and in this sense also this is significant. Here we have a number of projects already in mind and in the process of being properly developed, and broadband connectivity is among them. We were discussing with colleagues in EBRD currently how we can have increased also broadband connectivity. We also have very interesting components under this flagship, which are on STEM education. We do think that when we're talking about innovation and innovation-based economy, then we need innovative education first. And for that, we have very successful excellence centers in Armenia that operate both in Armenia, but are also exporting to wider Europe. And we're very proud of these institutions, and we want to support with our EU colleagues these institutions to continue to excel and to provide for better innovative education in Armenia. And then we have the fourth flagship, which is support to the southern regions of Armenia. And more specifically, Syunik region is targeted. This is also very critical for us because this is the region that was the most affected by the war in Nagorno-Karabakh and also the recent aggression against the sovereign territory of Armenia by Azerbaijan. And here, it is also very important that we have the EU on board to support a number of critical infrastructure. There we have, starting from water to drinking water infrastructure, irrigation, energy efficiency measures, and a lot more. Then we have the fifth one. Equally important, it's on green development. And we're talking specifically about Green Yerevan, the concept of the development of the capital city Yerevan. There we have very interesting projects on green transportation. We have very successful projects with EIB colleagues that is on energy efficiency. In public buildings, we have kindergartens, hospitals, and we continue implementing these measures, and new projects are in the pipeline to be implemented specifically to boost the green development of the capital city of Yerevan. We also have other cities, by the way, and we cooperate very closely with EBRD colleagues that are working on these green cities projects, which is a wider regional project. And then we have suggested 2 extra areas. Education, I mentioned. We believe that this is the core of everything, and we need to continue boosting this sector. With the EU, we have traditionally excellent cooperation here, and we continue doing that bilaterally as well. And we have also water management. We talk about sustainable development. We have a problem in our country with water management in terms of understanding that there is space for improvement, a lot of space for improvement, and recognizing this issue, we decided that this is something also that we need to look at. So these are generally the areas that we have identified together to work within this Eastern Partnership format. But again, there's a lot of space for cooperation and a number of areas to consider. And as we continue our work, new ideas might come up as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mane. That was a really great review of all the priorities of Armenia. And I will now turn to Elnur. Of course, there are some disagreements between Armenia and Azerbaijan, but they are also the sticking points. I heard the key word of connectivity, and I think that could be some point where that can be developed, some common project and common interest. But Elnur, you can walk us through your priorities in Azerbaijan, which might contribute to the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to the Czech government and the EU Commission for organization of this kind of debates forums. It's really a useful platform to reflect our ideas, our thoughts on what our governments are going to do for the next couple of years or maybe decades. Going back to the lessons learned from the last years, the last 3 years learned us one thing, that you should be ready, you should expect unexpected. No one could imagine 5, say 10 years ago that there will be the outbreak, the closing borders due to pandemic, or the war in the center of Europe between the biggest countries of the Europe. So this kind of, at that time, fantastic things are today happens in our real life. And it once again showed to everyone, including the EU partners, including the countries from Eastern Partnerships, that you shouldn't put your eggs in one basket. And everyone are trying to diversify their trade partners, diversify their connectivity, transport, logistics, etc. In that sense, what our government aiming to do, my colleague mentioned the war. Yet the war happened 2 years ago, and we liberated our territories, which were under occupation for the last 30 years. And we had 1 million IDPs, but I wouldn't like to politicize this forum. And I will just touch the economic outstandings of the platform. Year ago, our government adopted a program called Azerbaijan 2030 Strategic Vision, the top 5 national priorities, by saying that these priorities are steadily growing competitive economy, area of modern innovations, green growth economy, society based on the social justice, and revitalization of the liberated territories. By saying liberated territories, which we are going to touch on other questions, I guess, the smart cities, smart village conceptions are done on that territory right now, and we have got the IDPs who has returned to their roots, to their lands already. We have got smart villages called Ağalı 1 and Ağalı 2, and you can Google it and you can see the real results in that territory. Regarding the connectivity, my colleague, the esteemed colleague, Mani touched the north-south corridor, but I would like to add east-and-west corridor, so-called middle corridor via Caucasus, which will make beneficial for the cargo vessels to go from east to west and from the west to east. And on that, saying on that, we are together, colleagues are trying to work on the so-called Zengezur corridor, which will go through the Azerbaijan to Armenia and from there to Nakhchivan and further on to Turkey. It will open another line of connectivity between Europe and Asia via Caspian Sea. So it's area of interest for us. Regarding the renewables, Azerbaijan is eager to work on that issue. But, for example, the Mr. Minister of Economy and Sustainable Development of Georgia indicated hydro plants. Unfortunately, we don't have such kind of powers, but we count on solar and wind power. For example, on the Caspian shore of Azerbaijan, we have got around 157 gigawatts of the wind power energy. And by saying that, we recently have signed a MOU on strategic partnership with EU in the energy field. And there it also encompasses the connectivity via electricity connections, exporting of that electricity to the Europe. By saying this, we wanted to mention that we are interested in European investments directly by investors or via IFIs, EBRC, EIB or EBRD on financing of this kind of projects. So just a short brief for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Elnur. And now I would turn to Gennady. Well, for Georgia, Georgia is now just on the doorstep to the enlargement process. There's the internal process in Georgia, and behind this internal process of going through the conditions, there is a candidate status, and beyond there are many opportunities. So if you can just elaborate on these opportunities, where you see the sectors, where you see your priorities and the projects within the Eastern Partnership, and what the EU can do in deepening the economic and trade relationship.
Thank you for giving me the floor. Let me greet to everyone. Good afternoon. Let me greet also my colleagues from different countries of Eastern Partnership, as well as also colleagues from European Commission. Thanks also the Czech Republic for organizing such very important and timely business forum since 2019, where I was also taking participation the last forum that was physically held. There is a good sign that when we are physically meeting and discussing the opportunities that lies among Eastern Partnership countries and the cooperation that could be further developed between Eastern Partnership countries and with the European Union. Also talking about those challenges which we have been facing since 2019, since 2020, when the COVID-19 has been break out, and also this war has happened against Ukraine. We have seen that the challenges that countries in the region have been facing, and before recovering from COVID-19, this war has happened, which affected a lot to the countries in the region especially. And I would like to use this opportunity and express our solidarity to the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine. And we stand to our partners and brothers, to our Ukrainian partners and brothers, to these very tough times of war. And now this also what has happened because of this war also it's disrupted, and my colleague Taras Kachka has already talked about the disruption of value chains that has created a lot of headache towards transportation, and also the barriers to trade among the Eastern Partnership countries. The DCFTA that has helped a lot to Georgia, as well as also all the association agreement countries, which was really very important achievement with the European Union to enhance trade, also to place more export goods from Georgia and from the association countries to the European market, and to open up more trade opportunities with the European Union. Now we have another chance, which I have rightly mentioned, which is to get the candidacy status from the European Union. And we are very close to that, speaking about Georgia, having as a precondition and giving Georgia motivation with the European perspective status as having a precondition to implement those fundamental and where Georgia also stays committed to implement those fundamental reforms, where then European Union has expressed its readiness to give Georgia the candidacy status. At the same time, there was the same chance has been given to other two association countries, Ukraine and Moldova, giving the candidacy status, and at the same time after to also implement certain fundamental reforms. So it's all about the timing, and this timing is really very short for us to implement those reforms, which will get Georgia, Ukraine and Moldova closer to the European family by implementing those reforms, fundamental reforms that will change countries' democracies, democratic values in a better, and strengthen the democratic values and institutions in a better way that will support Georgia's integration to the European institutions. Talking about the economic perspective of the agreement that Georgia has signed since 2014, which is the association agreement, and the integral part of which is the deep and comprehensive free trade area, gives Georgia and gave Georgia a chance to implement the reforms to make legal approximation, as well as also bring those institutions closer to the European institutions, which will allow and allows already, and we see those benefits already of association agreement that is happening, to have more open and also more access for Georgian export goods to the European market. We see that the reforms that have been implemented already in trade and trade-related spheres has opened up in, for example, the sanitary and phytosanitary measures has opened up market for those goods, animal origin goods, for example, which were not able beforehand to enter to European market. So we see that those benefits are already happening, and Georgia has received already the gains of this DCFTA agreement. Where we see the future, also other sectoral cooperation with the European Union and among also the Eastern Partnership countries is three main areas which we are talking about together with our Eastern Partnership partners and European Union. This is related to the and very well reflected in Eastern Partnership Investment and Economic Partnership Initiative program that has been recently initiated, and this is related to connectivity. So this is where we see future cooperation should be enhanced and strengthened among Eastern Partnership countries as well as also the European Union. Connectivity, when talking about the connectivity, and it was very well mentioned by Mr. Lawrence, that first it comes the energy security and independence. And we have seen that since this war has happened against Ukraine, we saw more importance of putting more impetus to increase the independence, energy independence of those Eastern Partnership countries by creating more energy projects, increasing those infrastructure, as well as also to have a physical and direct connectivity with the European Union, which Georgia nowadays lacks in terms of physical and direct connectivity with the European Union. And by saying this, we intend to develop the undersea Black Sea cable to be connected directly with the European Union market. And we are now developing the feasibility study in that regard, which will lead us afterwards to raise funds, and through the support of EU funds as well as also the private sector and other donor and development partners are very much interested in developing this, we can say, the regional project, which is feasible, and we will see this after the feasibility study will be concluded, but the pre-feasibility already showed the feasibility, financial feasibility and the importance as an energy independence for not only for Georgia, because this will also connect the countries of Azerbaijan and Armenia to connect through Georgia also with the European Union. So it's a project of regional importance. And we see this cooperation as one of the top priority among the future cooperation with the European Union. Another one is the digital connectivity, which is another important project and is part of this among Eastern Partnership flagship projects, which has been already identified as one of the priority projects of future cooperation with the European Union and among Eastern Partnership countries, which intends also the undersea data cable under the Black Sea. So this is another infrastructure project on which another feasibility study is ongoing, and this feasibility study, which is financed also by the World Bank, will be finalized by the end of next year as the energy cable. So this will increase the data transfer and also the connectivity among European Union member countries, as well as also Georgia and the regional countries of the South Caucasus. Another one we see, which is now because of the transport disruption, which I was also talking from the very outset of my opening remarks, is the developing the transport infrastructure. Also to have more stable and regular transport routes, which means that these routes should be developed through developing the ferry feeder services and transportation routes, which should be stable and regular, which means then there will be more reliability of this route from the private sector who will be using this transportation routes. And since this northern corridor has become less stable, this east-west corridor is becoming now, as we call it, the middle corridor, is becoming now as a very important alternative corridor towards the goods coming from Central Asia to Europe, passing through Azerbaijan, Georgia, Turkey, and then to Europe, or vice versa. So as we see these opportunities increasing, we see this development of the feeder and ferry services are very important, and we intend with our Bulgarian and Romanian partners and with our Turkish partners to develop these services, and we are in close negotiations with them. Also, by developing the infrastructure, government of Georgia, by developing, for example, the port infrastructure, we intend to increase the cargo flows through Georgia, as well as also the regional importance projects like Anaklia deep sea port, as well as also the Baku-Tbilisi-Kars railway project, which has a great importance in order to develop this transit route for the cargos coming from Central Asia going to Europe or vice versa, is very important, and we are on the final stage of its development. We have this project already in pilot stage, and this will increase the capacity of cargo flows through this corridor. Georgia, as well as also the Eastern Partnership countries along this route, is very important, the development and to have this ambition to develop the region as a transit hub, putting as a trade hub and a hub for international trade, investments, and manufacturing. So this is where Georgia is targeting its cooperation opportunities, future cooperation opportunities among with the Eastern Partnership countries and with the European Union. I thank you.
Thank you, Gennady. So I see plenty of common agenda in the region, especially in connectivity, where really there is a lot going on. Now I would turn to Sergiu. What about Moldova and sectoral priorities for cooperation, and of course challenges, but also opportunities of the current situation, also in view of the candidate status and the future prospects?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. It's such a pleasure and honor to speak to this audience, and I'm glad to welcome our Eastern partners and the representative from the European Union. I would like to focus more on the agriculture sector, because I'm coming from Ministry of Agriculture, and specifically to the food security, because I think this is also an important topic that we should keep eye on. And of course, when unprovoked war on Ukraine from Russian Federation start, it's changed everything in the region. And we are living in alarming time. And the food security, it's really important for this period of time, because we saw how affects not just the regional food security, but also the around the world. So we, with help of our European Union partners, we managed to deal with some problems that we have at the borders. But we still have a lot of work to do to keep the flow of agriculture goods to the European Union and around the world. Second main challenge is diversification of the market. So Russia put the ban like a few weeks ago on our agriculture products, and we have some products that it's specially made for Russian market. And we are really focused right now to find new markets for those products. It's really challenge because it's political decision and it was exactly act in a period of harvest time when our agriculture producers were focused to export to the Russian Federation. And the third challenge is the cost of inputs, especially the fertilizers. Also, a lot of fertilizers come from Russia, and because of the supply chain, disrupting supply chain, the cost of fertilizers went up like a few times. And also the diesel, that it's increased the cost of food. So we see, all of us see in a plate how much we pay for this challenge that we face right now. About the priority, I would like to mention that one of the main priority for agriculture sector for next 7 years is, of course, the food security. We, Moldova, produce more than we need, especially the raw material. And we are looking for new markets, especially to diversify the markets, because with these Russian bonds, we see how some partners are not stable in commercial bilateral. So we think that, and I would like to use the opportunity to thank the European Union to double the quota on 7 agriculture products. And we think that the European Union should keep this quota and probably to increase because it's really a difficult time for us. And I would like to say that 21% of our population work in agriculture sector. So it's important to keep their job, and especially in rural area. And of course, the capacity building of the Moldavian public institution and the private sector. It's really important in this period of time because, and we do have the support, and I would like to thank for this also, and because it's important to be more resilient and to be more resilient in this difficult time. So I would also like to raise the question to the representative of European institution to speed up a little bit the question about the export of products of original animal products to the European Union. We also work a lot, so it's really important for us if we can speed up the process and see how we can export those products to the European Union. It's going to help us a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have a tour de table of Eastern partners, and now I would like to turn to the international financial institutions, EBRD and European Investment Bank. Both are having a great experience with the region. You've been there as important enablers for the trade and businesses. So where do you see the biggest opportunities for the region, and what is basically your advice for increasing economic ties and the business ties between the European Union and the regions, also in view of the current very difficult situation, I mean geopolitically, but also economic-wise? Susan, I will start with the EBRD with you. Please, you have the floor.
Is this on? Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank Czech government for the opportunity to be here. First of all, it's been fantastic listening to my fellow panel members talking about the challenges and the opportunities, because EBRD, I'm on the infrastructure side. Our bank was founded to support the private sector, but we recognize that you need a strong functioning infrastructure in order to enable the private sector. And so whereas 80% of our financing goes to the private sector, we still have about 20% which is going to work with governments at both the national and the sub-sovereign level, as well as private sector who are investing in needed infrastructure. So clearly what is happening in Ukraine has resulted in a crisis for Ukraine. I would like to say, Taras, that EBRD stands with Ukraine. We are currently providing significant financing for liquidity to support vital infrastructure as well as energy security, food security. This is predominantly through liquidity loans. And here I have to also extend my thanks to the European Union because this would only be possible without support from the EFSD guarantee. But also, we stand ready to support Ukraine currently after this horrible bombings to see if there's things that we can do to support emergency build back, but then also once the war ends, alongside the G7 partners, the European Union, EIB, World Bank, you know, this whole group, we feel it's important to set up a coordinating body to help the government to prioritize so that we can finance a build back better as quickly as possible and to support a modern, functioning, green Ukraine, which I can see in the future. But with respect to the panel members and the various projects that you spoke about, let me speak about the three areas that I mentioned before: transport, energy, and municipal side. So on the transport side, clearly, we see that with a lot of trade going through the Black Sea, once the Black Sea was blocked, this has resulted in a huge bottleneck for Ukraine and also basically for the region, also because a lot of goods were going through Russia. So here we see there is an opportunity. We are working with various governments to see if there's ways to improve getting grain out of Ukraine, but also one of the projects that we're currently discussing with the government of Moldova is what we can do to expand capacity in the rail network, to try to increase capacity so as to increase throughput by up to 3 times, because this will enable flow of goods through the Black Sea, through Ukraine, not through Ukraine, through Romania, which will help the southern markets, which is where most of these goods are sold. So, but also, as 2 of the panelists have mentioned, the middle corridor has increased in importance right now. And EBRD stands ready to support these options as well as traditional investments such as, you know, our standard work that we were doing to finance major motorways. But when you talk to an IFI, it's not just about the money. I think what we are, myself as well as my colleague from EIB bring to the table is we bring something else. We help ensure that the projects are well prepared, but also to ensure that these projects can be sustainability proofed for the future. You know, there's a lot of talk about motorways right now, and, you know, there's a huge question with Paris alignment. Should we be financing more motorways? Motorways are necessary. We recognize that. But we want to do, when we finance motorways and working with our colleagues in the governments, is to say, are there ways we can green transport? And here, with a lot of the countries that we are financing roads on, we are working with these countries to develop e-mobility platforms, because the pollution or the greenhouse gas emissions is coming from the cars. It is not coming from the road itself. So our view is that if countries have strong strategies on how they will plan to roll out e-mobility, this road in the future will be sustainability proofed. Similarly, on the energy side, there's been a huge dependence on gas, on fossil fuels. EBRD has always been about working with governments to find ways to bring in more renewables, to reduce the dependence on fossil fuels. So now we feel with the war on Ukraine, now is the time, right more than ever, to explore what can be done with renewables. In here, what EBRD can bring to the table is that we can support governments in developing energy renewable auctions. We've done this in numerous markets, which brings in significant market investment, and as a result can result in a low renewable price for the government. I know we did this in Albania, and it resulted in one of the lowest prices that, you know, beyond, much lower than what the government had actually anticipated. We also can work with governments to ensure that their corporate power purchase agreements are fit for purpose. But I think what we bring to the table is ensuring that these projects are structured in a fair, balanced way that will bring value for money to governments. And finally, I don't want to underscore the importance of the municipal investments. I know a lot of the discussion today has been about connectivity, integration, which is all very important. But on the municipal side, there also is, if you're polluting your water and your water is flowing into the waterways, it is affecting your neighbors. So it is very important for us to promote and support cities. And I think this is an area where EBRD has strong expertise, working with our flagship Green Cities program. And Green Cities, it's a $5 billion program where it's exciting to say that we have, I think, 55 cities that are participating. 14 are in the Caucasus and Moldova. So it's very exciting, and Ukraine. So this is very exciting. But what this program is about is working with cities to help them identify, benchmark, prioritize investments as well as actions to address climate change and environmental challenges. And it involves significant stakeholder engagement involving national government, municipal government, regional government, private sector, civil society, to come with a blueprint for a city, which our aim is that the city keeps on its website. And it was very exciting because Yerevan is a green city to hear that EIB is working with Yerevan on investments as well as other projects that we're working in this area. So as a result of this program, I think we've taken something like 30,000 cars off the road permanently as a result of the amount of greenhouse gas that has diminished. But finally, I'd also like to take a few seconds to talk to our colleagues at European Union. I can't underscore enough the importance of grants, both for technical assistance as well as CapEx, how important it is to help us structure these projects to enable our clients, the governments, to do more. A lot of times, governments, their budgets are strapped, but if we want to promote, more cutting-edge technologies, sometimes having capital grants can help governments make these decisions. So this is very important for us. And also, the guarantee scheme under EFSD is very, very important because it enables us to bring in private sector and other financiers into these markets, which is all very, very important. And then just as a final note, I just want to say a final thing that I feel that EBRD and EIB bring to the table is we have a really strong focus on implementation. We're talking a lot about projects, but these projects are meaningless unless they're implemented. And this is where I feel EBRD and EIB, we're good partners for you because we have such a strong focus on helping you achieve the objectives of those projects, because it's not about signing, it's about actually completing it and having the delivery. So anyway, this is it, but I think that with support from European Union, grants, CapEx, technical assistance. I think there's a lot that we can do in the region, and it has been very exciting listening to the panelists on ways that we can cooperate further. So thank you very much.
That was a good word of encouragement for cooperation from Susan, from EBRD. Another great actor who is experienced in the region is the European Investment Bank. So, Lionel, it's your turn to tell us how you see the opportunities.
Thank you very much, Jaroslav. And well, I'm really pleased to be here to shed some light on how the European Investment Bank can support, in a way, the export of the European project to the Eastern Partnership countries, which is basically our fundamental role here. And I was really pleased also to hear from representative from Eastern Partnership countries how the role of EBRD, EIB is already recognized in a number of projects which we intend to implement. Now, I would like to answer to your questions earlier from the perspective of the economy. And of course, the best to answer to this will be to ask to businesses. Now, we are lucky because we have the results of an enterprise survey, which was released earlier this year, where it was a joint report, actually, from EIB, EBRD, and IMF, where we interviewed more than 16,000 companies in, actually, Eastern Europe and Central Asia. So it goes a bit beyond the Eastern Partnership. And the survey was conducted in 2019, before the pandemic, and 2021. So it gives a very good indication as to what were the opportunities or the constraints to enable firms to be resilient in the context of the pandemic. And basically, there were three findings from this report. And this echoes very much what we heard before. The first one is that the most resilient and innovative firms which went through the pandemic are those which participate in global value chain and trade. So basically, trade with more developed, larger economies like the European Union transfer of know-how, transfer of innovation technologies enable the firms to be more competitive and more resilient. So we need to be a bit careful when we hear about de-globalization, because for this region, this will be certainly not the right recipe. The second finding is that access to finance continue to be a very important constraint for the growth of firms in the region. 55% of enterprises replied that they see access to finance as a constraint. Actually, 50% of businesses simply will not go to a commercial bank or to equity investors to finance themselves. They rely on their own resources. And the third finding is that the transition to net zero economy will clearly be a challenge for the region. And I think if we were to ask the question today again, well, the access to energy and to cheap energy is certainly an important issue. So in a way, I think the role for institutions like the EIB or EBRD is very much to answer to these challenges. And actually, this is what we find in the economic and investment plan, which were prepared by the European Union with partner countries. So basically, the connectivity, we heard about it in transport and digital. Second, for the private sector, the development of value chain and access to finance. And third, the energy transition and energy diversification, security of supply. If we look at this area, on connectivity, well, basically there are three ingredients here. One is to have, for connectivity projects, let's say a good coordination platform on deciding on which are the right connectivity projects. And here I would like to praise the work done by the European Commission, DG NEAR, DG MOVE in the past year in the context of the Eastern Partnership, where the 10T extended network was established, where priorities were established, where, let's say, common approach standards were developed. So it was certainly very helpful. Secondly, and I would echo what Susan said, we need to have, for this connectivity project, let's say, good quality, good preparation to make sure that then we would have good infrastructure. So the role of advisory technical assistance is very important. And here I would like to mention that we are rolling out a program, Eastern Partnership Investment in Connectivity, EPIC, funded by the EU and which is jointly developed by EIB and EBRD, which provides to transport promoters support to prepare high-quality projects. And the last ingredient is, of course, financing. Well, transport, digital is very capital-intensive. So you need to have access to concessional loans, not to, let's say, burden too much, let's say, the balance sheet of governments or of, let's say, investors, sponsors. And that's where we have a clear role to play, coming with long-term financing. EIB, we provided, I checked actually yesterday, over the past 5 years, nearly 3 billion euros of financing for connectivity projects in the Eastern Partnership region. So we heard and we supported the North-South corridor, the East-West corridor in Southern Caucasus. We co-financed a number of 10T projects in Moldova and Ukraine with EBRD. So connectivity will remain a priority and we will continue supporting this integration. And of course, specifically now, these solidarity lanes to take into account the new, let's say, reality, the new context for transport and trade and flows in the region. The second dimension is access to finance and development of value chain. So this, of course, we do by supporting directly the private sector. So we had implemented a number of programs, and I was pleased to hear this morning, notably in Moldova, in the agriculture sector, so the wine industry, horticulture industry, to enable exports to the European Union. And yes, I can now buy wine in Luxembourg markets from Moldova. We also support directly companies, so champions, which require and which need investment. But as I said, also access to finance is an issue. So from this perspective, we need to have the right instruments to provide financing to these entities to develop. So we do it under essentially the EU for Business program, which was presented earlier today. So notably providing what we call portfolio guarantees to banks to give them incentives to take more risk and to lend under acceptable terms to SMEs. And we develop also a program to the extent possible to have access to local currency, which is important for small entities. And last but not least, the energy. So here I would say the two dimensions, the supply side, where yes, more renewables, and there is important potential still in the region, in wind, hydro, in some part of the region. And interconnection are absolutely essential. We clearly see currently that the interconnection of Ukraine, Moldova with the NSOE network enable this country to go with these very turbulent times. And this can also play economically, not to be, let's say, dependent, and to have the possibility to reduce prices by playing on the market with different sources. But on the demand side, what is really important is, of course, to play on the energy efficiency. And here I think we have implemented a number of projects addressing energy efficiency in buildings, be it on the public buildings, on the residential side, and clearly this is one area where we want to do more. So thank you very much. Again, I will be happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you. So we covered a lot of ground, but I see there are some items where the attention was concentrated, like the connectivity, energy transformation, and digital transformation. That was basically sounding in all the interventions. I have a couple of more concrete questions, but first of all, I would like to ask the panelists if you want to react on each other's statements. Maybe someone was inspired by someone else. So please, is there such case? Yes, please. Mana.
Thank you so much. Yes, I think there is a need to reflect on very interesting ideas that the colleagues talked about. We mentioned increased connectivity of the region, and talking about east-west connectivity. And as we speak now, Armenia and Azerbaijan have created a format led by the deputy prime ministers on unblocking the region. And the term itself, unblocking, means actually opening up all the possible routes. And we have been, our formal position has been that we're ready for it. The physically existing infrastructure, ready to open it as soon as possible. And then also thinking of new ways that could connect the region to the larger networks. And when thinking about this connectivity, we have also been always ready, and we've negotiated in goodwill to provide for it through the sovereign territory of the Republic of Armenia. And we're also ready to discuss that, obviously, and our deputy prime ministers are doing that, hopefully. The minister mentioned in the former panel, and I can only reiterate that we stand ready to unblock the region and to reach sustainable peace, which we believe is the most important when we're talking about regional integration and more connectivity and achieving sustainable development of this region. Gennady also mentioned a very interesting project that is the Black Sea Undersea Cable. We're also very closely looking at this project. We believe it's very interesting, especially because in Armenia we do have this untapped potential in the production of renewables. And this is something that is also very, very interesting. Sergio talked about food security, and this is also something that needs a lot of attention. As we're facing the situation in the region, I think it is clear to everybody that diverse routes are critical. Critical also for food security, because whenever we have logistical issues, whenever there are disruptions in the supply chain, food security is number one, which people can see immediately. And in this sense also, more connectivity would definitely benefit everybody. And again, regional transportation routes are critical for that as well. I guess this much. With the colleagues from the European financial institutions, I already mentioned the cooperation that we have. Can only thank you for being very constructive, and hopefully we can build on whatever we've done already to further expand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mana. Yes, please, Elmnur.
Thank you. Thank you. Regarding the remarks to the things what were said, as Mana mentioned, connectivity, yes, it's you can count on us as a three Caucasus countries as a whole. So everyone in this boat depends on each other. I mean, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Armenia, opening connectivity, opening corridors via the Black Sea or via Armenia, it's the same thing. It will be beneficial for all three of us, and on the other side to Europe as a neighbor and the biggest partner of all of three countries. Regarding what Sergio said, food security issue. Actually, I mentioned before, like everyone started after this cases to diversify their trade partners and their connectivity. In case of Europe, you started to diversify your energy resources, but in case of Azerbaijan, it harmed us regarding the foodstuff. We had to find out new sources of the foods, wheat, sugar, namely, etc. Because Azerbaijan economy heavily consumption heavily depend on import of the food. So our colleagues, we have discussions with the Moldovan side on the import of wheat, sunflower oil, etc. to our country. So it's kind of opportunity for the regional countries. Regarding the my esteemed colleagues from the IFIs, what said, green city concept. I'm happy to inform that, yes, I'm from Ganja, it's second biggest city, and EBRD is participating as a Ganja green city economy, and we are working on the street lighting, waste management, we are working on the public transport, and we are working, we wanted to add Shamkir and other cities as well, so we're happy with that, but it's the right time for the EU to be in the region. As Vice Chancellor of Germany mentioned today in the morning, he said, quote to quote, our mistake was that we emphasized on the west rather than on east. So taking into account today's landscape in the region, it's the right time for the EU to maximize its presence in the economy of the Eastern Partnership countries. By saying that, I mean that there shouldn't be, probably everyone have seen the dialogue of the two heads of states, which happened a couple of days ago. One said to another that we should be based on the partner relationship. So there shouldn't be any kind of preconditions or saying that you should obey this, after that we will come. It's about EU bureaucracy and it's about the EU financial institutions as well. So if we, in case of EU, soften this kind of preconditions and requirements regarding the Eastern Partnership countries, I guess that the position of EU in these countries will be much more successful for EU as itself. Thanks.
Thank you for this call of having the EU more involved. And again, I hear the same challenges, the same or similar concerns across the region and also within the EU. Ignacio, please, your reaction.
Thank you, Jaroslav. And maybe I profit to answer on the question of food security, but in particular the question of Sergiu on what can the Union continue doing to help and diversify, no? Which is, I think, are two elements of the same matter. I think we have been helping both Ukraine and Moldova to diversify. away from Russia. I think we are, with the case of Azerbaijan as well, we are doing our best to see how we can dock an agreement there. That would not be a preferential agreement because they are not yet a WTO member, but that would hopefully facilitate trade among us. In the work of diversification, I think we have given both to Ukraine and Moldova 1 year unprecedented unilateral liberalization from our side. In the case of Moldova on key agricultural products that were not yet fully liberalized as a consequence of the DCFTA. We are in the process of assessing the impact of that. That is very new. So we are looking at what is the impact for them and for us. And on that, we are in dialogue with the authorities of both Moldova and Ukraine. So it's important that this is not the end of a process. I mean, we are in a permanent discussion, and the CFTA also foresees the possibility to bilaterally enhance the depth of the commitments we have on tariff liberalization for all products. And that takes me also finally to the question of Sergiu on the sanitary and phytosanitary requirements. That is complex. I think we have to cater for the integrity of the internal market and the security, of course, of consumers. Having said that, the DCFTA foresees a process of approximation that, if adequate approximation takes place in one of the partner countries and the adequate, control systems exist in that country, then we progressively grant access or authorization for animal products which are potentially risky for human health. We progressively give access to the internal market for those products. I mean, there are some examples for the three countries with a DCFTA. It is a process. Again, I mean, it's a process which is continuous. There is a sort of general infrastructure to be developed, and then there is a specific infrastructure for specific products. But we are, of course, more than ready to continue helping and working with them in adding more products where they can, get into the approximation, see how we can then move to the stage of authorizing more products for export to the Union, which are risky. And hopefully that will contribute both to their diversification, but also to access to food elsewhere as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ignacio. Lawrence, you wanted to expand on some issue?
Yes, please. I think, well, firstly, a couple of points where I think we do have a lot in common, but could be developed more. And both our partners and our colleagues from the IFIs mentioned it. I think, much as it's fabulous to be in the capital of the Czech Republic, I think what I'm hearing is it's also extremely important that the way we work, we reach out to the municipalities and go deep into the Eastern Partnership region. Actually, you see often the regions are 5 to 10 times poorer than the capitals. So I think where there's a real disparity is outside the capitals. And I think the work on municipalities, and in particular green and smart cities, is a very interesting opportunity as part of the Build Back Better campaign. There, I think we all agree. One thing that strikes me when I listen to the overall tenor of our debate, and you're right to say that there was a lot that we touched on in common: the connectivity, the digital, the green transition, energy, transport, and so forth. One element I think that's really important for us to address much more strongly is the whole area of education, research, and innovation. And I do know that in the audience there are quite a lot of innovative companies, and that it's sort of implicit to some extent in our work in digital, but it's much broader than that. So I think it's really important that one of the strong points of the European Union approach is its investment in research and development and a focus on innovation. And actually, I really enjoyed the exhibition, the Smart Cities exhibition, which was precisely about innovation. So I would like to bring that much more to the fore. And as President von der Leyen said, next year, 2023, will be the European Year of Skills. So I think investing in people is so fundamental. So I think that's an area that if perhaps building on the consensus we we've established here in this edition of the Eastern Partnership Business Forum, those could be areas that we could look to explore in a lot more detail. And just an appeal, I know that one of the benefits of these kind of events is we up our strategic communication. So let's continue this debate, whether it's on Twitter, Facebook, or elsewhere at Meredith EU. We'll be glad to continue the debate. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Lorenz, because you touched the municipality regions. These are really big areas we, as a Czech presidency, we wanted to highlight. So in less than 2 weeks, we will have a COLEAP General Assembly and or annual meeting, and also the Conference on Resilient Municipality, also focusing on smart cities concept and energy transformation and the digital transformation and so on. And after tomorrow, we will have, you touched upon the education and research and so on. After tomorrow, there will be the foundation of the Eastern Partnership University Cluster with plenty of universities from the Eastern Partnership countries. That is a pilot project of Charles University and a couple of European universities. And we hope that other projects like this will follow. And on the regions, 2 weeks ago, we had in the beautiful Renaissance city of Telč, the event on cyber resilience of the regions. So these are really the things which are so resonating, not only in the program of the Czech presidencies, but as we can see also in the region. I would have, though, one very concrete question, because connectivity, of course, and transportation and energy connectivity was sounding here, but also the digital connectivity. But of course, what is in the air, this is the issue of the roaming, because we are so close to the regional agreement, which was maybe supposed to be signed or could be signed in the near future. And I'd like to ask maybe Ignacio or Lorenz, how you see the prospect of that? Because, of course, the first step is the regional agreement signature, and then as a next step, there is a potential signature or move towards the roaming, decreasing of the roaming fees and decrease of the barriers in that field. Of course, when we speak with the communication regulator here in Czechia, they said it's important now, but in 5 years it will be 5G communication, and the roaming will be like a dinosaur of the communication. So that's the next generation. But still, it's very important, especially given of the high quantity of Ukrainian refugees on our territories who need to communicate, or Moldovan connection with Romania, etc. It's a pressing issue and very palpable for the people. Could you elaborate about perspectives of these?
Let me start, and I think Ignacio will comment on some of the specificities. I mean, on the political side, first of all, I think you're absolutely right, Jaroslav, that this is a key and pressing issue. That's a good way of putting it, because this is what people really, really want. And we're very conscious of that, and that's why at one of the recent summit, we underlined yet again how important it is to conclude that regional roaming agreement as the first step and the first agreed step on that path. And I hope that can indeed be finalized rapidly, because that will very much pave the way to the next steps. We're conscious of how we all agree, both Eastern partners and European Union, that the Eastern Partnership as a whole needs to be about bringing tangible benefits to people. And this is one of the most tangible benefits that people could get. So I would put it up there with the work that we did on visa liberalization as something that is such a strong driver that the people are pulling the politicians on both the Eastern Partnership and European Union side towards it. So let's, it's an appeal really to our friends on the Eastern Partner side. Let's conclude that regional roaming agreement. That's a priority. And I mean, as I'm sure Ignacio will add, we're very much working on the technical side also to get ready for the next phase. It won't be easy. It was not easy inside the European Union, but it's definitely something that we have very high on the priority list. And Ignacio, you want to add a couple of words on that?
Yeah, many thanks, Lawrence. I think on the regional agreement, we can be supportive, but that is, the region that has to agree. So I think on that I can nicely, pass the ball on to our colleagues from the Eastern partner countries. On bilateral agreements between the Union and our partners, I think we are ready to discuss. I mean, we are engaging. I think with, in particular, with Ukraine and Moldova. You referred to the particular question of Ukrainian refugees in the Union. I mean, a large number. I mean, many millions of Ukrainian citizens who are now in the Union. So the question of roaming is visible, important, has a practical implication. So we are working on it. The DCFTA with Ukraine has a particular feature where I recall Taras was actually involved in negotiating that at the time, that foresees integration into the internal market for a few services sectors, and one of them is telecommunications. So that may provide conceivably a hook to work on roaming with Ukraine, because at the end a roaming agreement is basically integrating a third country into the internal market for roaming. It was difficult to do it in the Union, and it's so difficult to do it with a third country that we have not done it with any third country so far. I mean, we have had quite a lot of third countries knocking at our door asking for an agreement on roaming, and we always gave them a cold shoulder for a variety of reasons. I mean, with the Eastern partners is different, and as I said, beyond the work on regional integration, we are looking at the feasibility, in particular with Ukraine, where there is a legal hook in the DCFTA, and that takes me to what I said at the beginning on the fact that the DCFTAs contain a lot of potential for development. Not all the DCFTAs are identical, but in the we are ready to continue discussing with the three on that particular issue. It's technically complex. I mean, whatever we do has to be compatible with our disciplines in the WTO, where we have a most favored nation discipline. We also have a most favored nation disciplines in bilateral agreements with third country, in services, with UK, with Canada, with Japan, etc. So whatever we do has to be technically very, it's a very complex technical exercise to get it right, and to be able to do it targeted, and to help, to really engage and deliver on integration in this particular aspect with the Eastern partners, and in particular with the DCFTA, in a way that does not necessarily extend to other countries inadvertently. So a very complex exercise in which we are ready to engage, but more than happy to know where we are, where our friends are in their own integration process on that.
Super, thank you for this. I will open the floor for the discussion, but still I have two questions, because we talked a lot about the DCFTA, but I would like to ask Mane and Elnur about the, let's say, treaty base of the relationship with the EU, the SIPA, and the agreement we are finalizing with Azerbaijan, because a lot of stuff changed around the geopolitics and all the challenges. So how you see the SIPA as a contribution, and are there any deficiencies or any possible improvement, and how far we are or how close we are to the final agreement? What will be the benefits with Azerbaijan? Mane, I'll starting with you.
Thank you so much for the question. Yes, indeed. Very, very important, and I'm happy you actually asked the question, because the Comprehensive and Enhanced Partnership Agreement with the European Union stands in the core of our reform agenda. We keep saying that it is not, we do not treat it as an agreement, as an international agreement with the EU, but like as part of our reform agenda in very many sectors that are critical for the development of the country. We're talking about economic cooperation today. I want to highlight that about 1/3 of this very comprehensive document is on trade. And it covers very many aspects of trade, starting from sanitary, phytosanitary measures, technical standards, technical barriers to trade, to coming to more important areas in terms of providing the right environment for doing business, transparency, anti-corruption, and these are all very, very thoroughly covered in the document. Now, going to the rest of it, we have areas, sectoral cooperation in all the possible sectors, basically, and also very important reforms in terms of independent judiciary, in terms of fight against corruption, human rights protection, good governance, etc. I think all of these are very, very closely connected to economic development because they provide for the right basis. If we talk about investment protection, we need independent judiciary. If we talk about equal opportunities for business, we need fight against corruption, etc. So all of this is very nicely put together in one document that we're very closely cooperating with the EU to implement. The document actually was signed in 2017, and since then it was partially in force. We're happy then that in March last year it fully entered into force as all the EU member states and the European Parliament ratified it. We have developed a very comprehensive roadmap which specifies the very clear and specific measures, what should be done to implement the SIPA provisions. And we at the Deputy Prime Minister's Office are closely monitoring the implementation of it all. I think we have really good progress. This is also kind of communicated perfectly with the EU annually when we have our partnership councils. And we stand ready and stand committed to continue implementing all the reforms that we covered in this document. Also, one very important aspect of this whole story, I think, is that when mentioning publishing this joint communication, the EU put stress on the importance of all these reforms. And we're very happy that, and I think the lesson is somehow learned the hard way, that economic cooperation is critical. And in the morning in the panel, there was a discussion about political and economic cooperation and whether we can ever separate them or not. And I do think that when thinking about one, the other can never be compromised. And the joint values should never be compromised. And they can only strengthen the cooperation, strengthen the economic cooperation, and that is why all the reforms that are in line with democracy are very critical to us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That was really encouraging and strong. Thank you for that, Elnora.
Thank you, Yaroslav, for the question. For now, we're undergoing the final revise of the trade part of the new agreement. We have agreed hundreds of articles, and I hope that we are back with a comprehensive package of comments on it, and we'll work with the colleagues from the European Commission. But as our President Aliyev has already mentioned, we are eager to finalize the document in the upcoming months, and we'll be ready for that. But it should be based on the win-win philosophy of the two parts of the negotiation process. Should be happy on that. That's all. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. As all the agreements, it should be win-win for both sides, absolutely. So we have a couple of minutes, not a big time, but still the time for a couple of questions from the audience. So if you are interested to put the question, we have such a big panel that I would like to ask you not only to identify yourself, but also to say to what panelist you would like to ask your question, because there is no space that everyone, one by one, answers the question. So please, the floor is to the audience. If there is, yes, in the back, there is a question. So I hope there is the floating microphone somewhere here. Yes. There is a fixed microphone, which is now becoming the floating microphone. And already it is traveling. Yes.
First of all, thank you. Good afternoon. I would like to ask the lady from Armenia, what's the perspective of airlines and aviation in Armenia?
This is the can you repeat the question?
What's the perspective? What's the idea of aviation and future position of aviation in Armenia?
In Armenia, aviation. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. If you could also introduce yourself, please.
Thank you. So my name is Petra, and I'm from flight school based in the Czech Republic, near Prague.
Thank you very much. Actually, a very interesting question. We discussed a lot, all kinds of infrastructure. We talked about roads, we talked about rail to a certain extent, but not aviation. So a good complementary to the discussion today. We have recently finalized and signed a common aviation agreement with the EU, and we're very proud of it. Currently, we are having very comprehensive discussions with our partners in terms of what we can do together to improve the standards, aviation standards, the safety standards, etc. And I think most of it is also covered in this document. And also, when talking about specific airlines operating in Armenia, we're also very happy that it is expanding. We have many European partners, including low-cost airlines that are entering the market. It promotes tourism. It was hit somehow, obviously. I think this was the worst hit sector during the COVID pandemic. And it obviously is reflected in Armenia as well. But in general, we see this flaw of new companies that come to Armenia. And if I am short, if I try to be brief, we're working both in terms of the standards and in terms of improving the safety and also partnering with very specific companies to expand the presence of these companies in Armenia. Thank you for the question. And I think there is also a lot that can be done in the region in terms of connectivity via air. So this is something that maybe next time we could put more stress on. Thank you.
I will subscribe because the Czechs are just going more and more and discovering Southern Caucasus as a touristic region. Georgia is big and very popular, Armenia, and also Azerbaijan with the national parks and the natural beauties. The only problem is that you are normally flying overnight, late night, and getting there early morning. So it's a long travel, but there is a space for improvement and increasing the intensity of the connection, definitely with Central Europe. So perhaps we are having 2 minutes. So do you want to exploit the 2 minutes? Yes, the last question, please. And you have the microphone right with you. So please identify yourself and tell us to whom you address your question.
Good afternoon. My name is Kristina Rybachok, and I represent the European Values Center here in Czech Republic. Thank you so much for this great discussion today. My question is to Ms. Goranson from the EBRD. We have been cooperating with the EBRD on the Green Cities project before, and we met with you in Marrakesh a few months ago. And we were stressing there the importance of grant programs, especially for the municipalities in reconstructing Ukraine, in reconstructing Ukrainian cities, because now they cannot afford taking loans, and you have great previous cooperation with the Green Cities program with at least 7 cities from Ukraine. I would like to ask you, how are things going on right now with cooperating with municipalities? What are the updates, and have you been discovering some opportunities for working with new cities or helping those cities that are in the biggest needs, like those liberated cities, for example? And have you been able to reach out to more donors to get the donor funding? Thank you so much.
Very important question. Susan.
Thank you. First of all, we have a very strong network of working with cities in Ukraine. We had, prior to the war, we had, I think, 4 or 5 bankers actually working in Kiev who had a strong network working with the 20 cities that were our clients. So after the war started, our bankers have relocated, but they continue to maintain these contacts, talking to the cities almost every single day. So we are in touch with the cities. We're in touch with, the mayor of Mariupol. We're also talking to the mayors of Lviv, Kiev, all the cities that are EBRD clients. And with respect to the green cities, we really see the green cities as an important platform for the building back. And we have added to the green cities a component to help cities that have been affected by the bombing to see what would be a rapid needs assessment so they can assess what can they do quickly. And we, actually, it's interesting to say the city of Khmelnytsky, they have asked that their Green City Action Plan, they wanted to continue the work even though the war is ongoing, because at first we said, do you really want to continue this? But they said, we think laying the groundwork is very, very important, and so we can be ready for the build back better. So we see going forward, we will continue to work very, very closely with cities. And you are right, grant support is very, very important. EBRD has reached out to its donors. We've been very lucky that we've benefited from a generous grant from the US government, where one of the areas that they are focusing on is support to cities. So we're looking to see how we can deploy this and support cities. So thank you for your question. It's good to see you again.
Thank you so much. So we came to the end of the panel, and I don't want to make conclusions because we covered such a big ground. I just want to remind one sentence. We need to expect unexpected. This is really something which is the spirit of the time. And I hope that the last question, which was targeting for the reconstruction of Ukraine, I would wish really that one of the biggest opportunities in the region of the Eastern Partnership will be the reconstruction of Ukraine, which will be made possible. And we hope all that this terrible war will end very soon, because it's negatively affecting all the region. Taras Kačka was here for the beginning, but I would like to say, just for the record and for all Ukrainians in the public, and I don't know whether Taras is still connected, maybe not, but definitely we stand for Ukraine, and we will be standing with Ukraine how long it takes, just no matter how long it takes, very strongly. And I would like to say that for us, the Eastern Partnership region is a really priority region. All these countries, one by one, are great partners of us. I'm speaking not only as a Czech diplomat, but also as the presidency of the European, or of the Council in the European Union, and part of the European Union as a member. So I would like to thank all the panelists, all of you in the audience, and please, in the audience, give a round of applause to all the panelists who were so brilliant. Thank you so much. And have a nice afternoon. Thank you so much.